Unprecedented rainfall and water security issues make today's stakeholder an important one. A former 3-term MP, he was admired for his hands-on approach during a nationwide flooding that hit Klang particularly hard over Christmas 2 years ago. It gives me great pleasure to speak to Charles Anthony Santiago. Charles, thank you for being on the program today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Today we're going to be talking about water, the importance of it as such a strategic asset for so many countries. And looking at the global statistics, clean water, access to clean water is alarming. And then if we take it back here to Malaysia, we have unprecedented rainfall, and yet we have so many communities that don't have supply or consistent supply of water. So today, could you just start by sharing your views on the risk of people not having access to clean water?
I think thanks for raising that important question. In my view, water is a fundamental human right. It is a non-negotiable right, and governments have a responsibility to ensure that people, especially the vulnerable communities, have access to drinking water. This is really quite important. But at the same time, we need to recognize that water plays an important role in a variety of ways. One, of course, it supports the household. Number two, it also supports common areas. And number three, it also supports businesses.
Yes.
So water needs to be adequately divided or adequately shared, if I can use that expression, among the different sectors or stakeholders in society. So this is the challenge number one. How do you make that happen? Number two, our governments have signed on to SDG goals. And the 6 SDG goals is about water and sanitation.
Sure.
So governments in that sense have a responsibility, a commitment, both at the federal level, at the international level, but as a developing country, Malaysia too has a commitment to its own people. And in that sense, Malaysia has done a good job, a fairly good job in ensuring access to water in Peninsular Malaysia is anywhere about 97%. And Sabah and Sarawak, I think it's been 90 and 93% access. But that doesn't mean that in all the places in the country, water is flowing 24/7 though. It doesn't mean that though. There are issues surrounding it though. The second issue that you actually had raised is an important one as well. It rains. It rains and it rains heavy. And the rainfall is unprecedented as well.
Yes.
So, compared to many years ago, the rainfall at a shorter period of time, is much more, it rains only half an hour, but enough to flood the city.
Right.
That tells you the volume of rain that's coming down. And I think what is important to recognize is that these are all extreme weather patterns. It's very hot, it's very humid, and it's also it's a lot of rain at the same time. At this time, this very moment actually is supposed to be El Nino, where we're supposed to go through this drought period in Malaysia.
Dry.
But it's raining every other day. So something has really gone wrong. And this is the thing that we have to recognize. The extreme weather patterns, if you want, is due to climate change. So, and therefore, this is something that we need to capture, we need to understand, and we need to plan. This is central though. My view is that we understand that there are issues, but we are not sufficiently planning for it, so that in the next 30, 40 years, for the next generation or two generations from now will be able to protect itself.
Right.
So I think this is something that has got to do with government priority in Malaysia, both the federal as well as the state government priority, and also reshaping or rethinking policies that the governments have to be putting forward.
Right.
One of the things that I actually am trying to push is the idea that we need to consider, we need to frame the management of water, including access to drinking water or access to water in general, as a national security priority. I think this is really, really important. In many countries, as a result of climate change, the amount of rainfall is reduced, the access to river water is also reduced, and therefore they are looking at shortages in their countries. We have not come to that stage, but that doesn't mean we are not going to hit there, in a short time. And I think there are already patterns that you can see in the country, where there are some places in the country which are what you can consider water stress. You will never think Malaysia is a water stressed country, but there are parts of Kedah which is water stressed. And that phenomenon can spread, can move to other areas as well as a result of the changes in climate. So therefore, we need to plan. So, for example, as a very quick in terms of planning and also allocation of resources for infrastructure development for Sarawak, Labuan, as well as Kelantan, the government has allocated something like 1.2 billion ringgit. But for building the LCS naval ship, it is allocated anywhere between 9 to 11 billion over the next years. But just let's flip it. Let's flip it and say if $11 billion goes towards infrastructure development or development for more water resources, we will be ready to face climate change in the next 2-3 years. So I urge the government, I asked the government to rethink. We are not going to use naval ships anytime soon. I'm not sure where the enemy is in this part of the world though. But clearly we have a challenge called climate change. And this is an uncertain, unpredictable enemy, if you want, for lack of another way of saying it though. And that's something that we need to give priority to now, because infrastructure development takes time.
Yes.
So you have to do it now to have it all ready by the next 5 to 10 years. Because you can be assured the weather is going to be harsh in all our parts of the world going forward though.
Right.
I mean,
absolutely.
Look at sea level rise. People are in denial that Malaysia has got no sea level rise. But look at the NARIM studies. Clearly shows that some parts of Selangor, some parts of Perak, and some parts of Johor already are experiencing sea level rise. It might not be in big measure, but you already can see trends already there. But we can't wait for it in the next 30 years to do something about it when you've already lost the land.
Sure.
You have to do it now. Water should be made a national security priority. More money should be invested so that Malaysians are protected. The next generation is protected. And it's the duty of this generation to ensure that the next generation is protected.
Right, absolutely.
But unfortunately in politics, it's always about tomorrow, though, winning the next elections. So sometimes this is when, our members of parliament, our leadership in government has to have this long view. And this is really a call for the long view. And not only in the area of water, but also in other areas.
Sure.
I think this is something we have no choice. We have to work towards it.
I mean, if I could just move on to the next area which you touched upon, and that is as an investment. As a country, we're looking for foreign direct investment, FDIs. Are there any sectors that can't come into our country because we don't have consistent water supply? Have you seen anybody who says they want to come in, but then when they look at some of our issues, which is consistent water supply, they say, well, that, we can't come in? Because some sectors are very dependent on clean water and consistent supply. Yeah.
Let me just share with you a recent discussion I had with a consultant that was brought in by the Federation of Malaysian Manufacturers in a meeting with me 10 days ago. This company, a European company, is planning to invest something like 7 billion ringgit in Malaysia in the next couple of years. They are already in the process of putting up the building and ready to go. Let's put it that way, ready to go. But they only can use 10% of their capacity. And that is because they don't have water. They don't have sufficient water. So when I asked them, this particular consultant who came to see us with FMM, I said, how come you didn't know that, before investing, you need to do your due diligence, your environmental studies, and so on and so forth? He said, well, the agency concerned didn't tell us. So now they're stuck. Now, that's not only them, but there are also other companies that are planning to come, but who are curious whether we have sufficient water to support them, especially data centers.
Right.
Data centers are water guzzlers, though. They need cooling processes 24/7. And apparently they can't recycle the water that they're using at some period of time or something now. So they need lots of water. So there are two data centers in Johor. I think there's one company planning in Cyberjaya, and one company that came to talk to me in Kuala Langat. They want to know whether there's water or not. So the question now is that water is also sufficient and necessary for investments, for new kinds of investments, and number two, for jobs.
Yes.
And therefore, then you need to think, how do you manage this issue? Countries have different experiences. In different, for example, in India, they use reclaimed water. I also think that I think maybe in Singapore too, they might be using the same thing. So I think we need to reprioritize. So we need to have this broad policy going forward in the next 5 years, that industrial production, maybe some agriculture practices can start using reclaimed water.
Right.
So we only use processed water, potable drinking water, for drinking purposes. We don't use potable drinking water for industrial development. So for construction, you can use reclaimed water. For industrial use, you can use reclaimed water.
They call it grey water, don't they? Grey water versus white water. And they have different levels of water that you can use within industry.
Yeah. So this one in Sunway that also came to us. They too need lots of water, and they don't think the present water provider can actually give them sufficient amount of water there for their own use. So you can see the scarcity part comes into play, especially for businesses.
Yeah.
Right? But as a government and as a regulator, we need to figure out where the priority areas are. People come first, businesses are there. But if there's no businesses, there are no jobs.
That's right.
So this is a circular kind of a movement though. So everybody needs to be supported. And how do you do that? So you need to have this notion of all of government and all of society that works together to make sure that households have the water they need, sufficient water for themselves, as well as businesses have water for themselves. So we need to think out of the box. We need to look at reclaimed water. We need to look at rainwater harvesting. And in businesses too must begin to invest in rainwater harvesting, which they are not. And I think this is now the time for everybody to move in a certain direction. We cannot, play the fool anymore with climate change.
You know, on one of my company visits, I had gone down to see some of our rivers. And what I could see was a lot of the plantation waste and also chicken farm waste was being dumped into the rivers. And what was explained to me is that the water treatment plants can't treat the water if the levels of ammonia are too high. And then they have to wait for rainfall in order to dilute it before they can treat it. And when it's dry, they just have to wait. So I just wondered, is that because we're not investing enough in our technology and getting higher level water treatment plants? If you look in Singapore, they are now using wastewater and treating it. So I just wondered, is that an area that you would look into or under your purview?
Span's job, for example, starts from the intake point of the river. So you have demarcation. River comes under DID, Drainage and Irrigation Department, or JPS. So it comes under them. And I think, of course, we can't look at it as, we can't divorce it from your intake point, because intake point is part of the river.
Yes.
We can say that's your problem. Of course, it's our problem as well. So I think the problem that we have is today, as you clearly point out, we have chicken droppings into the river. We have plastics in the river as well.
Right.
And then we have what you call pharmaceutical pollution as well. And then you have sewage pollution as well. Our river is now become a garbage bin for businesses as well as for households. So we dump our household stuff on the drain, which takes it to the river, and businesses dump their waste into the river as well. So this actually calls for, one, a massive priority in cleaning up rivers. So a lot of money should go to clean the water source that we have. That will make your cost of treating the water cheaper.
Right.
Right now, it's becoming an expensive affair, and the operators are saying it's becoming too expensive because prices are going up, and they have to pay more to clean the water, and they have to dilute, which even takes even more time. So that's one. I think also is a question of enforcement.
Yes.
There are existing laws already that says, one, you need to have sufficient distance from the river to the next industrial development or any kind of development. But we flaunt it all the time. We only talk about it when there's a pollution, though. And after that, it's all forgotten and everything is honky-dory. This is wrong. That's why I'm saying, we need all of this government approach, which I think is sadly lacking right now. We also have to start looking at, third-party waste providers. These are companies whose entire work is to actually take a waste product from your factory and process it in the way they need to be doing it, right? So, but there's other companies that actually take the waste and dump it into rivers, and I've seen it how it happens.
Yeah, me too.
So you cannot allow these unregistered third-party waste cleaning companies to run wild.
Right.
So this is again enforcement, but enforcement at two different levels. One, state enforcement, but more importantly, the industry itself needs to rein in its own people for actually flaunting the law. Otherwise, you actually take a private cost and socialize it for everybody. I mean, the last time it happened, the entire state of Selangor was stranded.
That's right.
And that's not fair. Just because one guy did it or one company did it, now the entire 5 million people here are stuck.
That's right.
So I think this is where government really has to go very hard, and industry itself has to rein in its own members from violating the laws. So you need to ensure, government needs to ensure that there's sufficient space between the river and the next industrial development area, for example. That's number one. And number two, waste disposable. That's right. Waste disposable third-party companies need to be recognized and registered. So, and also need to be regulated. So, for example, they will have some kind of a monitoring system in their trucks. So, if the trucks go in a certain direction and it stops for 1 hour, then you begin to ask, why is that truck stopping for 1 hour though? Right. Because chances are it's unloading something though.
That shouldn't be.
Yeah, shouldn't be. But in Malaysia, it's also possible because of traffic jam. But the car is moving, it's moving. But the thing is, it's stuck for 1 hour. But sometimes it's just stuck, which means that something else is happening.
Right.
So you need to monitor that. So I think there's so much of technology that has come into being. It's just that we are trying every way to cut costs. And the company is trying to cut costs, but what it doesn't realize is that cost is transferred to the public. It is socialized to the public. And therefore that becomes a problem. And sometimes your loss maybe is only 1 million because you are trying to find the cheaper way, but cost to society and government can be 10 million. So this is where government's enforcement is really, really very important.
If I just move, before we go into the public side, if we can just talk a little bit about the tourism dollar. As you know, tourism is a good foreign exchange earner. And one of our biggest issues in the country is hygiene. And having, tourists come and then they go to certain parts of the country and then they turn on the taps and the taps have brown water and they see buckets where they're washing plates in it and it's dirty. Malaysia has so many plus points. We have beautiful beaches, we have wonderful wildlife, we have great food.
Sure.
How can we try to instill this, ensure that we can have clean water to improve our overall hygiene levels?
If you ask that question to an operator, he or she will tell you that as far as they are concerned, water that comes out of the treatment plants and that comes right in front of your house, that water is clean water. And sometimes the problem is actually it is within the house itself.
Or the pipes.
The pipes. So sometimes they say that is where the problem lies.
Okay.
That's how an operator will explain it. But if you ask consumers, they will say, hey, it makes no sense. I just bought a house in less than 1 year, I'm having this problem. So you mean to say the pipes in between, the main intake, the main outside my house up to this one is corroded within 1 year. So it's both have the arguments to make, and I think basically this is where we need to be vigilant, though. We need to be vigilant, and that is why I think there must be some kind of a societal audit on the operator itself, and there are many ways of doing that, though. So, for example, if I can suggest, like I just received a letter from urban consumer representing a whole variety of people in his area, including big businesses and so on. Why is there a water problem in that place, though? So, my view is I want to respond to that, though. So, we wrote to Selangor and said, hey, can you please explain this? Selangor explained it. So, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring both of them together. Let's see how we
try and sort it out.
Let's see whether we understand what's happening now. And the whole point is not to find fault, but to solve the problem, though.
Exactly.
To solve the problem. And there are many problems that can be solved just by talking to each other, sitting with each other, and resolving the problem. And I think operators should be transparent, and people also should understand that some things take time. When you repair, for example, it takes time. But also, I think, since we're talking about pollution and wasting water, if you go to sometimes our government departments, even the private sector, the water will be leaking. If you go into the bathrooms, the water, is dripping. So I think that is why I think you need to ensure that a water audit is done in almost every building. A household should do it in their own house, whether it's a small house or a big house. Factories should be doing it. Companies all should be doing it. And I say that because this issue of water is going to come back to bite us in a very big way. Yes. So if we don't conserve now, we're going to pay the price. If, businessmen might think, oh, water is so cheap, it's not a big issue. Yeah, but your grandson might not have water when he's growing up, though. So that's the connection that you have to keep in mind. So in Malaysia, everything is breakable. You break, you can go and buy a new one. But we don't realize that every time you break something, it's a resource that somebody can use that you're using now. Right. So I think that thinking has to change. Number two, we need to go hard on pollution. Our rivers are polluted beyond belief. There are enough laws. So Spain actually has now pollution. We are going to increase from 500,000 to 15 million. Anywhere that you can be fined. And I also think you can go one step forward, that directors of those companies, especially involved in pollution, should be taken off, meaning that they should not be directors in that particular industry for 5 years. It's only then that people take it seriously. When they realize that their incomes are going to be hurt, their investments are going to be hurt, then they will take things seriously.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it's always like, I can pay off, I can do this. And in a country where paying off becomes the norm, it becomes a national disease, then everything can be solved. So I think that has to be done. Together, also what we need to be doing, a third point that I think that you're alluding to is this notion of a different kind of an audit under ESG. Alliance Bank, for example, did a study of small and medium industries on how they are embracing of ESG and what they have done, what are the levels of priority, though. So when it comes to E, the environment part, the top priority is energy efficiency, though. Zero carbon, that is the priority, though. But whereas water is right at the bottom. So how come water, which is so important, gets to the bottom and energy becomes on top, though? Okay, so this has to change, and I think water should sit same together with energy, even for higher itself. So the way we look at auditing itself has to change.
Right.
It has to change because without water, factories can't run. So why is energy more important than water?
Yeah. I mean, you've been on record talking about our aging dams as well, right? So you're already warning, that we may and we will face further supply disruptions or even no water for longer periods. If I could just talk to you a little bit, I've seen recently that they're talking about now tariffs could be implemented for households as well as businesses. Do you think this is the answer so that we can have improved technology? Is that where the tariffs are going to go to? Is it pipes? What are your thoughts about imposing tariffs at this point?
I think there are two issues that you had raised. One is involving businesses, and the other involving consumers, households. The one involving tariff increase for businesses has already been implemented. It's already been done. Now it is actually for households. I think just to be clear, the prerogative or the power to increase tariffs lies with the minister and by extension cabinet. The minister has the power to increase tariffs. SPEN really has no role in making that decision.
Okay.
That decision is made by the minister and how he views it. But as a regulator, what we do is we have consultations throughout the year, asking people for comments, asking people for their views on A, B, C, D. One is on the quality of water, one in access to water, issues that they have with water, and of course tariffs as well. I think generally the perception is we do not mind paying for water, provided there is no corruption, no leakages, and more efficiency on the part of operators.
And where will the tariffs go? Do you know what they're going to be using the tariffs for? Is it for technology?
Well, by and large, actually, a good number of them are making losses. That's the sad part. See, for example, in the case of Pahang, tariffs have not increased in the last 40 years. That's a long time. Whereas the prices of your chemicals, your pipes, worker salaries, capacity building for your staff has increased by 50, 60, 70%. But the tariff has not increased. And then I think in the case of Kedah, in the case of Terengganu, it's about 20 over years, have not increased. And I think it's also true for Kedah as well. So a lot of our operators are actually not making money. And that is why government has to pump money into their coffers to keep them afloat. So there comes a point that they can't take it anymore. And so if we ask the operator, he will say, look, I can't even pay my staff adequately. I can't even pay my, the NRW, the non-revenue water contractor sufficiently though. So some part of that has been taken off from the state to the federal. That means the government pays for it. So the government has a different approach in managing NRW, but we are still far behind, really far behind. Like for example, in the case of Perlis, NRW is 60%. 60%. That means for every $100, 60 ringgit is wasted.
Right.
So that they need all the help they can get, and Kedah needs all the help they can get. Kelantan needs all the help. Pahang, as well as Terengganu, all of them need lots of help. The ones that are doing better financially will be like Penang, Selangor, Perak, as well as Johor.
And will the tariffs be the same? So will we pay for water regardless of which state we're in? Or
no, I think it'll be different.
It'll be different.
I'm logically saying it's different, but that decision will be made by the minister.
I see. Okay. Well, Charles, thank you very much for being with us today. I think this has been really very informative. And hopefully, they take on board all that you have said, about the audits and about enforcement. You've really given us a lot of nuggets of great information. So thank you very much.
Part of my work, though.
No,
but thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. Thank you. And that was my conversation with the straight-talking Charles Santiago, who shared his views about how the quality and the quantity of water impacts both households and businesses, and how our strategic planning is crucial to curb potential problems in the future. Will industry take on board the warnings and suggestions on how we can future-proof our water supply for society and businesses alike? I am Shireen Muhiudeen. See you next time on Stakeholders with Shireen.